It's GT the Vibe Podcast coming at you with another episode. Today we're going to talk about, can't get my pocket in there, generosity and giving for Christians. Kind of a 101 type of thing. We're going to have two parts. I'll go over part one, and then part two will come out later on this week. So we'll go ahead and get this thing kicked off. Generosity and giving. Pull up my notes here. I speak on notes all the time, guys. So John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." So giving requires sacrifice, right? Ultimate sacrifice. God gave the ultimate sacrifice, but in his giving, right, he gave in order that we as human beings, sons of God, daughters of God as well, can have the opportunity to be able to come on this earth and then be the example, right? So what he did is he sent the example of generosity. So Jesus himself was the example of generosity in God and was the example of the ultimate sacrifice, right? So he gave his son. He gave his son. Sacrifice, offering, gift, generosity. And so he desires his people to be generous people. Acts 20:35 says, "In everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak, remembering the words the Lord Jesus himself said, 'It's more blessed to give than to receive,'" right? So he is saying that we need to have generous hearts. Generosity and giving is a matter of the heart. As most other things that are biblical and spiritual will say, is that most of the time people get into a mindset of thinking that, and I've heard this before from Christians a lot, they think that if you don't give from your last little bit, that you're not giving, you're not generous. So basically saying that if a person is rich and they give, then they're giving in vain because they're not giving from their last, they're giving from their wealth. And I don't think that when it comes to giving, that is meant for that type of mindset. It's meant for where the heart is, right? And we're going to go over some things and probably ruffle some feathers like I always do when it comes to giving. We're going to talk about tithing too, how that's not something that makes you generous. It doesn't make you a giver. Giving to an organization not necessarily makes you a giver, because you're giving to an organization or somebody way. It's easier to go directly to the person, right? When Jesus walked the earth and he was feeding people that needed to be fed, he didn't go to a corporation and give them the bread. He broke the bread himself and gave it to the people that needed the bread right then and there, right? And so he was able to give in abundance to people and give them the opportunity to be able to eat. Whereas nowadays people want to give to an organization, or they want to give to a group and then have that group disperse it. And when there's the opportunity for you to give just like Jesus gave, because being a Christian means you walk like Christ. So Christ didn't go through an organization to give. He handed it out himself, right? 2 Corinthians 9:6 says, "Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously." So he again speaks here in 2 Corinthians. I'll read a couple more verses out of here that he expects you to be generous. He expects you to have a kind, giving heart, right? Giving to those in need, right? That's what it's about. It's not about glamour. It's not about doing it in front of people to look good. It's not about making yourself have a certain image, because when he gave, he just gave to whoever's right there. There was no tabloids. There was no newspaper. There was no news articles to put him out there and say, "Hey, well, you're giving to these people, so we're just going to glorify you because you're giving." The glory in generosity comes from God the Father himself. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give. Again, it's a matter of the heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. As it is written, "They have freely scattered their gifts to the poor. Their righteousness endures forever." Right there it says it. They have freely scattered their gifts to the poor. And so look at some of the inner cities. Look at some of the places where we live. I live in Wichita, Kansas. There's a lot of homeless population. So there's a lot of people that are in need. Granted, they have their own issues, but we're not here to judge their issues. We're here to give. If they are in need, somebody is less fortunate than you are, then your job, you're called to give. And so I think that people get judgmental, and sometimes I do it too. I've been there in that position where I've been judgmental on some of the homeless people. I know why they're homeless in my line of work. We kind of deal with them on a regular basis, so I understand why they're homeless. But it still does not take away that we are commanded by God to give to the poor. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God, right? And so when you give the opportunity to show what Jesus is like, right? How he was, his nature, and the nature of God the Father is there. So that's how you bring in other people to Christ, by giving, right? So you go out with a giving heart and a giving mind, and giving is not all about monetary. It's not all about food. Sometimes giving is about time. Maybe you go clean something up or clean up a part of town that homeless people live in, and so that way they have the opportunity to have some cleaner grounds. Maybe you go talk to them. Maybe you just go out and have conversations with them. I've had conversations with many homeless people. In fact, I learned a lot about God from a homeless guy. A guy that was down on his luck, didn't have nothing left, so he started to speak to me, and I learned a lot from this guy. I learned a lot more from this guy than I have from a lot of pastors. I've been to a lot of churches. This guy was giving the real to me because he's out on the streets. He doesn't have anything left all he has left is his dignity, right? And intact inside his dignity is the glory and the spirit of God, because God put that in him. This service that you perform is not only supplying the needs of the Lord's people, but is also overflowing in many expressions of thanks to God. So we're not only supplying the Lord's people, which everybody's technically the Lord's people, but I think here they're talking more about Christians. So when you give and supply, and you're supplying people, you don't just supply the people that go to your church or the people that are in your group. You supply everyone, right? Because everyone is God's people. And understand this, that when they are down on their luck and they're in need, they're looking for somebody to come out there and be a lending hand. And that's what Jesus did. And again, being a Christian means you walk like Jesus did. So when Jesus is on earth and he's breaking bread and handing out to people, that's the mindset that you have to have. Because of the service by which you have proved yourselves, others will praise God for the obedience that accompanies for confession of the gospel of Christ, and you for generosity and sharing with them and with everyone else. And in their prayers for you, their hearts will go out to you because of the surpassing grace God has given you. Thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. And so here again, it talks about giving to other people, because that will help other people turn to God. Because if they see the Father in you, right? We're created in his image, and we're supposed to pick up our cross daily as we go out into the world, and we go out to try to give people that example of what Jesus Christ is and who he was when he walked the earth. When you give, that opens up a door for them to receive something more than what you're given. You may just be given food, but there may be something else that you're given, and you got to think about it like that. So when you go out into the communities and you go out to talk to the people that are around in your communities that are suffering, giving them something, giving them, they need hope. So if you give them something to eat, that gives them a little bit of hope, right? If you go out and you have a conversation with them and spend 20, 30 minutes talking to them about life and about things like that, you may be able to impart the word in them and give them hope. Whereas their all hope is lost, because a lot of these people out here that are homeless and I mean, this goes far beyond the homeless and the poor people. This goes into people that are addicted to stuff, addicted to drugs, addicted to alcohol. Maybe you having a conversation with this person could change their life. What about people with mental health issues? People out here that are struggling, that don't want to live anymore. You take the time out of your day to put some type of life into them, because we are givers of life. That's what God has put into us. When you get the Holy Spirit down in you and you walk the earth like Jesus did, you're given your job is to give people life, right? Because there's life and death in all decisions. So if you're not giving anything, then you're not doing what you've been called to do. John 3:17 says, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? So if you see somebody out here that's in need and you have materials, possessions, you have things that you can give. Because at the end of the day, one thing I've learned from a young age, and I'll tell you a little bit about my life story when I was younger to kind of tell you how I got the mindset that I got when it comes to giving, is when you don't have anything, you can give. When you have a lot, you can still give. There's no levels to this. There's no, well, if this person gives out of their last little bit, and this person gives out of their abundance, then this person right here's their gifts means more than this person's gift. No, that's not how this works. It's all a matter of the heart, right? If it's in your heart to give and you made that decision, guess what? You give it, right? So you give it to the person that needs it, whether it's time, whether it's a prophetic word, whether it's biblical word, whether it's that you go out and you have fellowship with people that may not have fellowship. There's so many people that sit on the church lawns in Wichita, Kansas, so many homeless people that I've seen as I cruise the streets sitting on the church lawns, that if a person comes out of the church building to talk to them, who knows, you could change a life, right? But people don't come out of the church building to talk to them because that time, that gift, that generosity is not within that person's heart, right? They'll give to people that come into the church building, but they won't give to people that are sitting right outside the church. 2 big churches down on Broadway in Wichita, Kansas. And like I said, I see a lot of homeless people hanging around. They're on the sidewalks and all that stuff, and they're congregating. I mean, would it be cool if a pastor went out there and started talking to them, had a conversation with them, right? I will tell you one group of people that does it very well that I've seen in my experience is Catholic people. Catholic people are out there constantly. I have conversations with them because I tell them how to be safe while they're out there giving, because that's my job, is keep the community safe. And so I give them tips. I'm like, hey, do this or do that, or you could try this or try that. And these are opportunities for them to continue to do what they're doing, but do it in a safe manner, right? And so I see the Catholics out there quite often. They're the main ones that I see that actually do it. One of the churches down there is a Catholic church, and they usually feed the homeless people couple times a week. Sometimes they'll go up on a lawn. There's a park that they'll have a meet at, and they give. But that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're called to do, right? As Christians, that's what we're called to do. We're called to give. Literally says it right there in John 3:17. That's a great verse because, John 3:16 comes before that, right? The ultimate sacrifice in John 3:16, right, says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And then John 3:17 turns right back around, 1 John 3:17. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? And so he's basically calling you guys out. In this verse, he's basically calling you guys out. If you are not giving, the love of God is not in you, right? And then as I talked about how people do it in groups, and they want to only give if with the backing of the name of their church, or the backing of the name of their organization, or the backing of the name of their group. So we're going to go to Matthew 6:1-4. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. To be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. And so most places, they do these things in front of people because they want to be seen. It's not about the ones that are seen. It's about the people that are taking care of business behind the scenes. You get a person that gives a homeless person $20 here. You got a person that goes to McDonald's and buys a homeless person a meal here. You get a person that has a conversation with somebody who's an addict that may be struggling right here. They give 20 or 30 minutes. Like, those are the times when the opportunity for Christ to really overflow into somebody happens. It doesn't happen when you got your group of people out here and you got your shirts on and you're taking pictures and you're trying to look good, right? That is the image of generosity, not actual generosity. And so we have to have the actual generosity, not just the image. We're not trying to come out here and portray generosity. We're out here being generous. Those are two different things. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. God knows where your heart is, and he knows what you're doing. And so you don't have to give to tell people you gave. You don't have to give to make other people look good or to make yourself look good. Because if you're giving to have the image of generosity, it's because you're not in actually a generous person. And so you have to understand that whenever you come to this mindset of generosity, is that it's not about the image of generosity, it's about actual generosity. And I'm going to go over a couple things that I've seen, that I've heard. I know sometimes I've heard that that tithing makes people generous. That is the most incorrect statement that I've ever heard in my entire life. People can tithe all day, every day, and not be generous people, right? they're giving. When you think about a tithe, right? That is not a generosity, or that's not generous or gift. That's nothing. That's not going to the poor, first of all. When you look at generosity in a biblical term, it's going to the needy, right? It's going to people that are less fortunate. When you give a tithe to the church, that is not creating generosity, but that is also not generosity at all. I know people get all butthurt about tithing and all this mess. I don't really care about the whole tithing thing. I'm just saying that if just because you tithe doesn't mean that you're generous. And so you have to understand that. And I think that people think that, oh, I tithe, so that makes me generous. No, that is incorrect. Because there's a lot of people out there that tithe all day, every day at the church, but haven't given a dime of anything to the poor or less fortunate or needy. And if you're that person, you need to look at where your heart is. Just because you do some of the traditions that have been brought about by man, and you'll hear me say that a lot on my podcast for Christians, is that men create traditions for themselves. God creates traditions for the holy. And so there are two separate sets of traditions. And so when you get into tithing and you get into giving, because when you think about tithing and sacrifice, because it used to be sacrifice, that's what it was. It was the sacrifice of crops. And so they're giving their crops or they sacrifice. They may give a cow or they may give a pig or some type of sacrifice from their crops, or they would give that away. So that was their tithe, right? That was what they gave to the church or to Christ per se. And so that was not generous. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that that was a generous thing, because that's not what that was about. That was something that they were commanded to do in the Old Testament, was to give or sacrifice something to God. And so that's what they did. They sacrificed something, and that's what they were commanded to do. But that does not mean you're generous. And so Christians tend to get the tithing and generosity are two separate boats. Some people are extremely called to tithe. Like that's what they will beat a tree down to make sure that they give a tithe at church. But those same people won't give anything to the poor out here. They'll walk by the poor as if they're better than them, right? Or as if they don't deserve anything. And so you have to ask yourself the question, why are you so called? Why does your heart call you so much to tithe, but not to be generous to the less fortunate, when God has called you to be generous to the less fortunate? When Jesus himself, when he walked the earth, was generous to the less fortunate. And so if your heart is calling you to do that, but you're not being called to do this, you have to start to ask yourself some questions. And the main question is why? And typically when people tithe at church, but don't give anything to the needy or to the less fortunate, those are usually the type of Christians that I've dealt with that will say, well, if a rich person gives, it's not really giving. It doesn't mean anything because they're rich. That's the type of mindset that they have, right? When they're not giving anything at all, they're just tithing at the church. And so because they don't have the spirit of generosity in them, when somebody else is generous, just because they have an abundance of an overflow of possessions, so they're generous, this person will knock down their generosity because they're not generous themselves. And so if the generosity is not in their heart, then they will knock down somebody else's generosity. And so I'm of the belief that generosity is all a matter of the heart. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, or you're middle class, upper class, lower class, whatever. Whatever your heart desires for you to give it. And one person's gift does not mean more than the other person's gift, because nowhere in the Bible did it say one man's gift is better than another. It just said be generous. Over and over again through these verses that I spoke to you guys, it literally just says be generous. It doesn't say, well, a rich man's generosity means less than a poor man's generosity. Granted, some people will give their last, and that's okay. If you're called to give your last, give your last. I will never frown upon that. I will never frown about that. If you're called to give your last, because there's a widow that gave her last, and she was blessed, and her giving had meaning to it. And so when we talk about generosity, it's okay for a rich person to give. It's okay for a poor person to give. It's okay for the middle person to give, as long as you're giving. And it all matters to where your heart is, because giving and generosity is a matter of the heart. What you'll find is that most people are called to give to their church. And so their church will have things that are centered around the church. And it's just like giving to your family. So if I give my kids $20, I'm not generous. That does not make me generous, right? Because that stays in the family. You have to go outside the family to find generosity. That's where generosity starts. Generosity starts with going outside the family, going outside your immediate people and giving to those who are in need. Because my kids aren't in need. So if I give $20 to my son, he's not in need right now. Like, the dude has everything he needs. All four of my kids have everything they need. So if I give them something, that does not make me a generous person. That is the mindset that a lot of Christians take in to generosity. Is they think that tithing makes them generous, or they think that giving this to the church makes them generous, right? No, that does not make you generous. That just makes you giving to the church. Now, those are the same people that will frown upon the rich person that I said earlier that gives to the dang poor people. He gives to the needy. I know people that buy water bottles. They make full meals, like those sandwich chips, cookie, something like that. They'll kind of put meals together. They'll have hundreds of them, and they will go out there and hand the bags out. And those are people that have abundance. They're rich people. They do that. But that rich person is more likely to give than the middle class or poorer person that goes to church every single day and gives to the church. And that's the problem, is that the people that do that frown upon the rich person that's giving, when he's out there actually doing what God has called him to do. And it's crazy to me that people who aren't even Christians do a better job of the generosity piece than Christians do. Christians want to keep everything in this bubble, in this box, and then they want to prosper inside this little bubble in this box. God did not call for you to prosper inside your bubble and box. He called for you to go out there. You have to go out among the people. If you don't go out among the people, you can't really be given. You can't be generous. So it's step one of generosity is to go out among the people and find out who needs whatever it is that you're able to give. And so if your heart calls you to give time and effort, go out in the community and find out who needs your time and effort. If it's the youth and you got to go talk to the youth and you got to go have conversations with the teens, go do some outreach with the teens. If it's mothers who have experienced domestic abuse, domestic violence, and you've been through it, so you've got some words of encouragement to give to these young ladies, to give to these women who got to take care of their kids on their own now because there's some domestic abuse, go to the Harbor House, call them, say, I will come there, take them some meals, have a conversation with them. See, this is generosity 101 right here. It's not about giving money. It's about giving. You can give anything, time, effort, right? Wisdom. We have to give wisdom. So to whom much is given, much is expected, is what is said. And so that's the reason why I don't subscribe to the mindset that a lot of Christians say, well, this rich person gives, but their gift isn't as valuable. No, it says to whom much is given, much is expected. So that person that is getting a lot, right, they're prospering a lot, they're going to give a lot. That's what they do. And me, I may not have a lot, but I'll give what I can when I can. And anytime somebody's in need, I feel pulled to give. Like something inside of me is like, hey, man, you got to give that person something. Whether it's conversation, food, monetary, whatever I could give. Like a bag. You got a bag in your car and a homeless person's bag rips up. Go give them your bag. That's that you're pulled to give. Like your heart, there's something inside of you that pulls you to generosity. Real quick before I end this, I want to talk a little bit about my childhood to get you guys kind of in the mindset of what makes it easy for me to give. And then my next episode is going to be for people who grew up different than me, and then how they can change some of their mindset around giving to make themselves more generous, right, in God's eyes. So I grew up with two brothers. I'm going to say three, but it was three of us, three total males in the house. Single mom. She worked two jobs. As a from what I remember, and then eventually she started working one job, but we didn't have nothing. Like we had nothing. And so for me, I grew up with nothing. And so now that I'm doing better, I've given a lot better to my kids. It's hard work. I will tell you that. I love what I do for work. I'm able to go out in the community and serve the community and protect them. But yeah, so I've been able to, I've grown out of the poverty level that I was in. But what I learned in poverty and not having anything is it's easy to give. When you have nothing, it's easy to give. When you grow up with nothing, you know what it's like to have nothing, right? So I know what it's like to not know what your next meal is going to be. We peanut butter and jelly sandwiches consistently, or fried chicken. I think fried chicken was cheap back in the early 2000s and 90s. I was born in '89, just to kind of get to age myself a little bit. And so in the '90s, my dad left. I was like 5 or 6 years old, so that was in the mid '90s. And so, yeah, things were cheaper, but we ate fried chicken consistently because that's what we could afford to eat, right? We didn't get to go eat extravagantly all the time. Like if we got carry out pizza, my mom tried to do that once a month if we could, right? And so we look forward to that. But I grew up with nothing. I had nothing. And so it's easy for me to understand what it's like to have nothing, number one, and what it's like to give something away because I don't need it. I realized from a young age with how my mom taught me and some of the values that she gave to me and my brothers that she always said, if you don't have it, you don't need it anyway. And I used to be like, dang, then we must not need anything because we don't have anything. But what my mom actually meant by that is, you have everything that you need at hand, right? If you get a little bit more, it's okay to give some of that away because you already know what it's like to not have much, right? So it's easier for me to let things go. I'm not a very materialistic person because I didn't have a lot of materials growing up. So like I didn't have a lot of toys growing up. So giving away toys, I can give away toys like it's nothing. Like as soon as the kids don't want to play with them, I'll be like, shove the toys out the house, give them to somebody who needs it. Like that's what my heart desires. That's something that's inside of me that I can't pick that out of somebody else. I can't grab that from somebody else because that's in me. And so I can't expect other people to think like me because not everybody grew up like I did. And so that's the reason why it's been ingrained in me from a young age because my mom always told me, even though we had nothing, she always said, to whom much is given, much is expected. So my mom must have knew that eventually her sons were going to grow up to be successful one day. And so she instilled that in us at a young age to where it was in there. It clicked. And so as I got older, as I grew up, as I started to have the opportunity to make money, to be able to go out in the community and talk to people, what I learned is that it makes me feel good to give. It's almost selfish to give because I feel good about it. Like my heart, like whenever somebody needs something, my heart is like talking to them like, man, hey, G, this person said they need something, or this person looks like they need something. So we might need to go over here and figure out what this person needs. Like I'm drawn to it. And I think that, when you're low, when you're at the lowest of lows in your life, when you've been broke down to the bottom, you know what the bottom feels like. And so I kind of know what it feels like to not know when the next meal is coming, right? Or when the next time you're going to be able to take a shower, or if the electricity is going to go out, or if you're going to end up on the streets. I know what that feels like. So people that are out there on the streets, we were teetering that level. So we know what it feels like. Granted, my mom would never... She would have worked herself to death to make sure that didn't happen. But who knows? We don't know what God's plan was going to be back then. We knew that we were going through some tough times, some trials and tribulations, but it helped us get to where we are today. And so as I grew from the mindset and the small things that my mom instilled inside of me, they've grown over the years. As I've grown, as my wisdom and understanding have grown, they've grown. And so as I understand God more and I have a better relationship with God, I understand what she means by to whom much is given, much is expected. I understand what she meant by, hey, it's okay to give. Even when you don't have a whole lot, it's okay to give. And so I understand that. And that's something that I thank my mom for doing because she didn't have to. But she did. She instilled those values in us, and those values have stuck. And when I say stuck, I mean they're going to take me to the grave. I'll go to the grave giving. I can care less. I give whatever. Somebody's in need. My heart's just like drawn to it. If your heart's not drawn to that type of stuff, you need to get closer with Jesus. Because let me tell you, the Lord, when Jesus walked the earth, his heart was drawn to that. If somebody was in need, guess who was always there? Jesus. When you're in need, guess who's always there? Jesus. He's always there, no matter what. So if your heart isn't drawn to it, it's like something is just pulling at your chest to go out amongst the people and figure out who needs what. You need to get closer to Jesus and start to ask him to change your heart. Because what I found in my experience is that a lot of people that have problems in the generosity department usually are selfish. So if you are selfish, the Lord has to help change your selfishness so you can be selfless, right? Putting yourself above others. You have to have humility to be generous, right? You have to be able to sacrifice to be generous. To sacrifice means to give something up. So you have to be able to sacrifice to be generous. Those are traits of a generous person. Humility, sacrifice, right? Respect. You have to have a level of respect to be able to even go down to the level of the people that you need to talk to be able to figure out what they need. And so you have to have respect in order for you to be generous. That's crazy. Crazy to think that, oh man, you got to have respect to be generous. You absolutely, positively do. Right? Because you have to respect, because these people are on their last little bit. All they got left is dignity. A lot of them that I've talked to, I've dealt with, they can put their whole life's worth in a backpack and carry it on their back. So they literally carry with them their whole life's work on their back. How many U-Hauls do you guys need for all your life's worth? Right? Can you imagine having your life's worth in a backpack? Some of you never have gone through adversity or struggles, and it shows in the generosity department. A lot of your most generous people, that I've contacted, I've been in contact with, that I've dealt with, are people that have gone through some type of struggle. People that have been at the lowest of lows. They experience things that's helped them to be able to move along in the generosity department. It makes it easier to be generous, because you know what it's like to have all your belongings fit in a backpack. And so when you see somebody walking down the street with their backpack on, talk to them. It's okay to talk to them. Ask them what their name is. Just a little 2 or 3 minute conversation can go a long way for these people. Trust me, I know it can go a long, long way for these people. I live in a city, population's like 500,000. I think we're about 500,000, maybe more. I don't remember the last census for Wichita, Kansas, but what I do know is our homeless population is robust. It's huge. I've been to places that they call it Narnia, tent city. I mean, you got hundreds of homeless people that live down by a river, and there's tents everywhere. I've been down in there. I've seen what it looks like. Been around those people. They're just normal human beings like me. They can have the conversation that I'm having with you guys, just like anybody else, right? They're just down on their luck, right? They just can't fight this addiction, right? They have these issues came up or this came up, but that doesn't make them any less worthy of the gifts of generous people than anybody else. Kids, there's a whole lot of kids out here that are in the system. There's a couple of St. Francis Ministries is one that comes to mind immediately from Wichita, Kansas. These kids don't even have backpacks. They don't have clothing for school. They go house to house. They don't have nothing, right? What about some outreach to those guys? What if you have wisdom and you can give it to these teenagers, so that way they don't think that this is all that life has to offer? Because one of those kids may be able to change the world one day. Because trust me, somebody that's gone through some adversity, somebody that's gone through something, has a different perspective than somebody that hasn't. And so let's take that into this week. Hopefully you guys go out there and talk to somebody. If you see them with a backpack on, know that that is their life. Everything that they have that belongs to them is inside that backpack. Some of them push a cart, and everything that they have inside that cart is their life. That's their well-being. That's their living. Some people have a Walmart bag that they carry. I've seen it all. And that's all they have. That's it. They have nothing else. They have nothing left. That's all they have is that and their dignity. It may be one change of clothes that they have. That's it. And they're running to try to make sure that they get to the Lord's diner to get something to eat. What if they miss it and they don't get a meal that night? You guys are eating in abundance, and there's people out here that have nothing. So have a little humility, because that helps with the generosity. So I'm going to go over these couple things again real quick for you that you have to be a generous person. Respect, number one. You have to have respect to be a generous person. Humility. You have to have the ability to put others above yourself. If you can't put others above yourself, you're not going to give. It's always going to be about you. If it's always going to be about you, then you're not going to give. It's harder to give. Right? And understand that. It's harder to give. You can be the type of person that struggles to give all your life. You can tithe at the church, give to the church all day, every day. And then when God calls you up and you talking to him, he's going to ask you, why were you not generous? And you're going to sit there and say, well, I gave to the church and I did this. But he's going to, that's not what he commanded you to do. Many times the word poor or less fortunate, you get those words in the Bible. There's a reason why he commands us to give to people that are in need. because they need it. And that opens the door. Like, we're out here opening the door for them. We're a bridge for them to be able to get to Christ, right? We're a bridge for them. But you can't be a bridge if you're not out there giving. If you only go to church every Sunday, like I said, or go to your group meetings every single week, that's all you do, you're not doing what you're called to do. There's more to being a Christian and living a life like Christ than that. People who do that are selfish. They're worried about themselves. I'm going to go do this so I can be better myself, or so I can better myself. Well, how about you help other people get better? Because that raises up everybody. You either have a community mindset or you don't. And that's the question you must ask yourself, because you must have a community mindset when it comes to generosity. And so I'm going to conclude our first episode of generosity. So the next episode of generosity will come out probably Thursday or Friday this week. And I'm going to talk about sacrifice, because that's the other side of generosity, is the ability to be able to sacrifice, the ability to be able to give in the first place, right? You can have all these great traits. You can be a respectful person. You can have humility that can go on for days. But if you don't have the ability to sacrifice, it's going to make it hard for you to be able to give, right? Because part of giving is sacrifice, because you're giving something up, right? If you got $100 coming in and you got to get through the week and you decide to give $50 of that to somebody else, that's $50 less that you have for yourself. So you have to actually sacrifice. I don't want to go too deep, but you have to sacrifice to be able to give in the first place. And so we're going to talk about the art of sacrifice either Thursday or Friday this week, so look for that to come out. Again, guys, if you like my content, please like and subscribe to the channel. I will continue to push all day, told like it is. I can speak on my own experiences growing up, and you guys will learn a lot more about me as we kind of go through this, because I'll throw some of my life struggles in there to help kind of put the nail in a little bit harder, to where you guys can really understand what it is that I'm trying to get to. But the goal is growth. And the goal is to live a life like Christ, because that's what being a Christian is living like Christ. So remember, Jesus was out there. So if you're not out there, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's GT, I'm out.